So within the Israelite prophetic tradition, there's kind of three different models or phases that they go throughout history. The first one is prophecy during the early monarchy, or at the beginning of the monarchy, but before it even happens. And these prophets, they're very different from a lot of what I've been talking about in these videos. Are very different from what is later called classic prophetism, which is mostly what I've been talking about in these videos. In the earliest stages of prophecy, um, the prophets are less messengers from God and more just witnesses of His presence. There's a lot of more magical elements to the prophets, a lot more of like um, divination type stuff. For instance, when King Saul, one second, when King Saul needs to find his donkey, he consults a prophet, and the prophet is able to tell him where he is. Or there's also a story recorded of a prophet called Balaam, who is a prophet from a different culture, and he was asked to curse the Israelites. But he blesses them instead. And this story, it has kind of these more magical elements to it of the curses and the blessings. But it demonstrates that God is the God of all the prophets. Even the foreign prophets are subject to Him. But these more magical traces disappear in classic prophetism. And then we have the beginning of individual prophetism. So if you remember in the previous video where I talked about the beginnings or the biblical origins of prophetism, I talked a little bit about Samuel and how he's kind of the new beginning. He's kind of the transition point between these early monarchy prophets and individual prophets. He's the first great prophet, and then Nathan is another one who follows. The prophet Nathan is another one who falls into this. Um, he's the one who confronts David over um, Bathsheba when he has a soldier deliberately killed so that he could marry this soldier's wife. And then Elijah and his successor Elisha um, are prophets who confronted a lot of the pagan practices that were being introduced, a lot of the worship of idols. However, there's a lot of more magical elements present within these two prophets. They work a lot of miracles. So all four of these are kind of examples of this transitioning from some of these more mystical elements of prophecy into what um, into this later stage where it's more about the confrontation of the people and calling them to conversion. And in this classic prophetism, it can be broken down into a further um, set of stages. In the prior to the 8th century BC, we have Amos, Hosea, Isaiah, and Micah. They confront a number of issues, predominantly social problems. Um, there was rapid economic growth that really highlighted social inequality. They confronted a lot of illegitimate worship, especially to pagan idols, and they preached a lot about political problems. That was kind of this conflict between Assyria and Egypt. There were the two powers that Israel was caught in the middle of. Um, and the prophets urged neutrality. Some people wanted to side with Assyria, some people wanted to side with Egypt. And then they were succeeded by Zephaniah, Jeremiah, and Habakkuk. And this was more, they were less united. They treated different themes from each other, whereas Amos, Hosea, Isaiah, and Micah kind of had similarities between them. But there was some religious reforms that they preached on. Jeremiah, in particular, was about the coming catastrophe. So then after the fall of Jerusalem, we have Ezekiel and Isaiah. And you'll notice Isaiah appears in three of these categories. That's because in the book of Isaiah, there are the words of three different prophets who all kind of preach within the same tradition, who all can be associated with each other. Um, and we'll talk about that in another video a little bit more. So this is where we kind of get into the themes of salvation, a little bit of coming catastrophe, but also renewal and salvation. And then after the exile, after they return, we have Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, and another Isaiah. These guys were very diverse. There's a lot of different things going on during this time period, but one of them was the reconstruction. So Jerusalem and the temple were destroyed. They had to reconstruct the temple, but the reconstruction that the prophets talk about is much more than just the reconstruction of the temple, but of their whole state of life and reconstructing their status as a people of God.